Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Control Committee, Thursday, 13th of July. I'm Councillor Jerry Pearce. I'm Chair of the committee. Any apologies? And I think Councillor Prosser.
Councillor Prosser.
Thank you very much. Late items, I believe we have one. James, I think you're going to present that. Thank you.
For several years, since I think 2016, we've been including the QR code on our neighbour notification letters, and that's been quite successful. So recently we were asked if it was possible we could roll that out to the weekly list that we produce, that you all get. And so hopefully starting either from tomorrow or next Friday, we'll be putting out the weekly list looking like that, with the QR code and also the URL for the application. So it's a lot easier for you to find the application. The QR code, obviously, if you've got a reader on your phone, which you should have, or if you're on a PC, you can use the link. So hopefully that will work and make people happy.
That's great. Thanks, James. I think it was your idea, Lucy. You can take that one. You can take that one if you want. Item 3, declarations of interest. We have none. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of June 2023. I believe everybody's had a copy. Thank you, Councillor Hassel. There's a seconder for that. Councillor Holmes, thank you. Item 5, minutes of the meeting of the Conservation Committee. Thank you very much. Item 6, appeal decisions. Are they yours, Ian?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
There's quite a list tonight. There is a small housekeeping note. I'm sure you've seen it. At the bottom of page 4, there's just an error. Under code 22/00838, it relates to the installation of a display screen adjacent to 9 and 10 Albion Street and not 9 London Road. There's quite a few appeals to report this time. The first two relate to a conservation issue at Margaret Street, a Grade 2 star listed building at Bolton St Mary's Church on Bolton Lane, and then we've got other small scale appeal decisions which are useful. They've all got useful commentary, and there's quite a number at the end, 10 in total, relating to the multifunctional screens with adverts on the back at various locations across the city centre that we've dealt with under delegated powers. So I'm happy to take questions, Chair, because I've done some notes on various ones, but I didn't want to take up too much time on them because they're all there with links to take a look at. I would have a look at the conservation one at 2 Margaret Street. That's got a useful discussion and narrative in there about the character of conservation areas and how they change. And then at Bolton St Mary's Church, it's a Grade 2 star listed building, so a high grade listed building. And then the public benefits under paragraph 202 of the framework are dealt with there. So useful commentaries in them, and happy to take any questions on those, Chair. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Councillor Kay.
I thought it was interesting that they split the opinions on the digital display screens depending on location. Is that something that officers feel that they can learn significantly from? And was any consideration given to the energy consumption of them?
I mean, they have been problematical issues to deal with because, for example, the display at the bottom of St Peter's Street near to but not adjacent to the HSBC Bank, they affect heritage assets. In the conservation area is a heritage asset in itself, and then individual designated assets in the form of listed buildings. So in those situations, we generally do take a very keen look at them, and they've got to be exceedingly well sited in order to sit happily in the historic core of the city. The one that was allowed up near the spot, the inspector just disagreed with our assertion about the impact in the street and the associated clutter, but the issue relative to power consumption isn't a material consideration. It's something that I know you're interested in, and it's an important factor. But in terms of advertisement consent, we're only looking at public safety and visual amenity, essentially. And then in those inspectors' letters, they do make the distinction between our control under the advertisement regulations and our control under the Planning Act in relation to planning applications and the development plan, because the development plan is not decisive. It's a material consideration with advert applications, but it's not at the fore like it is with planning applications. Okay, Chair?
That's fine, thanks, Ian. Any other questions? Before we move on, my OCD's playing up. Could you move your Sarah on my screen, to be quite honest? Thank you. I'm fine, I can carry on. Thanks for those. So, item number 7, applications to be considered. So, we'll start with 7.1, Day Centre 41 to 43 Brentford Drive. Sarah H., I believe that's you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That is me. We've got a few housekeeping items. We received today a revised site layout plan, which was amending alignment of 3 of the parking spaces, access ramp, and has reduced level changes across the site with removal of steps. It's intended to remove any kind of restrictions to disabled access and just twiddle around with the parking spaces to the eastern part of the site boundary. Parking spaces on the eastern side and the access ramp have sort of been realigned so they fit better with the street. We've received Derbyshire Wildlife Trust comments. Sufficient information has now been received regarding bats in the building, and they have made no objections subject to recommended conditions. We've also received comments from the Derbyshire Swift Conservation Project, and they recommend swift nest bricks to be included via a condition. Full permission is sought for redevelopment of the site at 41 to 43 Brentford Drive in Mackworth to provide 6 semi-detached dwelling houses. The existing former daycare centre on the site, which is currently vacant, would be demolished. The site sits in a residential street which comprises of 2-storey terrace and semi-detached houses. The proposed housing would comprise 2-bedroom family houses and be managed by Derby Homes as affordable units to meet a housing need in this part of the city. Each plot would have an off-street parking space and a private rear garden with level access to each of the houses. Solar panels and air source heat pumps would also be installed with each unit. Petition has been received in objection to the application, concerns raising about parking, impact on residents' amenity, impact on the environment, and impacts on bats within the building. The new housing is considered to be of a good quality design and form, which is in keeping with the character of the surrounding residential area. In terms of residential amenity, the proposed housing would maintain acceptable levels of privacy and amenity for neighbouring houses, and a high-quality living environment would be formed for the new occupants. No objections have been raised from highways officers in terms of parking and access arrangements, subject to conditions. There are no flood risk issues affecting the site. An existing rowan tree to the front of the site is to be retained or replaced if it's not possible to retain it. And the tree officer has recommended conditions for tree protection measures and an arboricultural method statement. A bat emergence survey for the site has revealed no evidence of bats roosting in the building, and Derbyshire Wildlife Trust are satisfied that no further surveys are required. Biodiversity net gain is proposed through a scheme of planting and enhancement measures, which will also be secured by condition. The benefits to the scheme are in terms of housing delivery, and particularly the provision of new social housing in an area of identified need. The proposed housing scheme is therefore considered to meet the overall intentions of the relevant local plan policies and the overarching guidance in the NPPF. So we're recommending it for approval subject to the recommended conditions. You have Councillor Pandy to speak.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Pandy, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Good evening, Chair. Yeah, interesting presentation. As I can see, some of the issues that were more than 40 residents, and majority of them who live on Brentford Drive, objected to this development, and seems like the presentation addressed some of those objections. But the main point of this, me coming here and talking about this, is this was 2 houses, and now it's been getting converted into 6 houses, which is quite a big sort of development, considering 2 houses into 6 houses. Those houses, semi-detached, would be very tiny houses. I know considerable planning and everything has already been done, but it seems a bit too much for 2 house property to convert into 6 tiny places. And going by, by experience with Derby Homes and all, and if any news and nuisance complaints start coming through, it will become a nightmare. In that there would be no scope of amending or modifying anything in those 6 properties. And same with the parking. So I know the parking law says like 1, and Derby Homes have done their homework, 1 parking space per property. But if the street is narrow and the opposite side is green, grass verge, which is not far, the parking is going to be, it's going to be a concern on the street, which majority of the residents highlighted in their objection anyway. And the residents were also concerned what sort of the usage this property will have. Would it be given to, if it's going to go to youth sports schemes and like that, then again we have seen in the ward what sort of challenges that bring. And I know that ASB gets deflected towards policing and all, but it is a concern. And when ASB starts happening, then we don't see any solutions coming from anyone, including the police. So these are the main objection I'll bring it to is how this is too big. A plan for 2-bedroom house changing into 6-bedroom property, and I would urge the planning committee, if there is a way to look into that and maybe reduce, if it can be reduced to either 5, so that can be considered to change this and look into the objections which more than 40 petitioners have signed. That would be all. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pandy. Sarah?
In terms of the footprint of the buildings, obviously it was a pair of large semi-detached houses. These are quite small semi-detached houses. They are 2-bedroom properties. With their Derby Homes design these houses, they are provided across the city. So we feel in terms of living environment, floor space provided, it meets the minimum national space standards. It has parking space for each property, whereas at the moment they don't. So we're happy with the overall layout and design, that it does fit in with the character and proportions of the properties in this location. In terms of parking, I mean, there aren't any current parking spaces for a lot of these properties on this street, so these properties would have a parking space, obviously, which is a bonus compared to what is currently there. So we feel the scheme is a high quality scheme, and we promote the recommendation.
Thanks, Sarah. Any questions? Councillor Moulton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Reading the documentation for this application, I think this is an ideal site to put affordable homes, considering how many people we have on our waiting list and the people who are inadequately housed at the moment. And this being in a residential area, I can't see any reason for refusal of this site. In fact, I'm sure the people who are at the moment inadequately housed will be willing to be housed here, whether they be Derby Homes tenants or not. And I think that's irrelevant, who's going to be the landlord. But I'm not sure what Councillor Pandy was trying to say. Was he telling us that all Derby Homes tenants cause antisocial behaviour? I'm sure Maria Murphy would have something to say about that. On the whole, and from reading the report and listening to the officer's outline, this is a sensible application. The conditions, I think, are practical for the site. I'm pleased that the rowan tree, and we've got the arboricultural condition, and it seems to meet all our standards, so I'm in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you. Can I just ask, Sarah, you mentioned the Swift box boxes, are they been, is that a condition that they're going to be built into the building?
We've attached a biodiversity enhancement condition which can include and incorporate Swift bricks within that scheme.
Thank you. So I saw those in operation on Radio Derby the other day on their website. Any more questions? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask, just to be very clear, is this sort of housing particularly novel in terms of the city of Derby, or has this happened in other locations on other streets, and have they caused any form of antisocial behavior or stress to the communities?
This type of housing has been provided elsewhere in the city. We currently have a number of applications from Derby Homes for this similar types of housing to be provided elsewhere in the city. I can't really comment on whether they're cause antisocial behaviour. It's obviously not something that we deal with, but it is a common type of development that we've seen elsewhere in the city.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other questions? Councillor Kerr.
Can I welcome the change we've seen from the original outline plan to the one with the type small changes to the layout on the front, because I think it looks much tidier and more straightforward. But I would welcome another change, and it's keep that display up at the moment, please, because you can see there that the three pairs of semis are all shown at exactly the same height. But you can also see that the road is gently going down towards the right-hand side. There's another plan that shows there's quite a gradient on the street. And because the houses have all been built with the roof line level, it means that we're going to have to build up the land at this end. We need to dig down further at the far end for the foundations. And people will have to drag wheelie bins up slopes to get them to storage, rather than not. And now, they're little things to think about, but if people are going to leave, if it's more difficult to leave people to get your bin in and out, there's a greater tendency for people to leave it out rather than put it away. And we know that bins close to the streets are a constant headache in lots of places. Now, they've taken away the steps, so that's one barrier that's been reduced. But we're also leaving at this end of the development, we're leaving a responsibility for a supporting wall at the end of the development because of the level changes. And I feel that there is an opportunity at this stage, with very little additional cost and probably a reduced cost in terms of construction, to let the houses follow the gradient of the street, and that would reduce the overlooking of this last house to the adjacent property, make marginal difference at the other end. And I would just welcome that we could allow the applicant, which is the council, and its designers, to come back with a scheme that would just allow the levels to be approved. I think it's a good scheme. I'm one of the council's members on the Derby Homes board, which would eventually be looking after these properties. And I just think a small change like that is something that we could enable to happen without it having to come back to committee, but just for us to delegate to the chair and officers to negotiate this for posterity.
Ian, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, Councillor Kerr made some very useful comments about some of the levels at the front of the site, and I think we could deal with it. I mean, they're relatively subtle changes that we're talking about in terms of land levels at the front, and possible just looking at the overall height of the buildings, if they're within the envelope of the range of height shown on the proposed plans, and just for fine tuning those details, we could cover that off by condition, Chair. if the rest of the members were okay with that.
I'm happy with that. If everybody else is happy with that, any more? Yeah, amendments, yeah. Councillor Rawson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I welcome this this particular application. There's a very high need, as we know, for social housing, affordable housing within the city. I was talking to one of the families in my ward, actually, well, two families actually, who were living in one 2-bedroomed house, five people living in a 2-bedroom properties. So that's just an example. I'm sure there's similar situations across the city. So we are in dire need of additional social housing for our families. So I do welcome this. It's a site that's not currently in use, so it'll be bringing that back into use. All of the issues that have been raised seem to have been dealt with. In terms of parking, looks reasonable. It's good to see that they'll be attempting to retain the tree there at the front, if at all possible. So that is a positive, and also the green credentials. I can't recall having a Derby Homes application for ground source heat pumps before, but hopefully we'll see more of those as they come through in the future. So taking on board Councillor Kerr's comments, I support those if that's able to be done in a fairly simple and straightforward way without too much delay to the new homes coming forward. I'd support this application, Chair.
Thank you very much. I tend to agree with all the comments on there. Yeah, it's bringing an empty properties into use, the same as you say, same as everybody's saying, we need the housing in all areas, in all wards. So I would go for this one as well. So Councillor Hassel.
Sorry, Chair, just very quickly, I just wonder whether angled parking bays would provide more safer egress from the sites rather than coming straight out into the road. Just as a comment, really.
Could that be looked at, sir? Oh, it's there.
No, I'd suggest not, because obviously if you put it at an angle, then that makes it quite acute to try and go in a certain direction. So obviously having it perpendicular to the road provides the easiest access and egress from the property, I'd suggest. Really, people should be reversing into their drives rather than driving in, I might add.
Can we have that condition?
That's what highway code says.
Can't be a condition though, Andy, can it?
Can I just check that there's a condition built in for lowering the curb all along there?
Can we move to the vote, everybody, please? All those in favour? With conditions, yes. 1, 2, 3. Oh, hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
6 in favour, then, Chair.
6 in favour. All those against? 6 in favour. Carried. Thank you very much. We go to item 7.2, Infinity Park Way, and that's to the Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. This application seeks outline planning permission with all matters reserved for the delivery of development across land within the city that has a long-standing employment allocation in the local plan. Policy CP10 identifies the land as a strategic employment location, contributing 86.8 hectares of land towards the city's employment land supply. Local Plan Policy AC15 is site-specific, and it allocates the land for a new high-quality business park with the aim of securing a mix of employment uses. The delivery of the business park, known as Infinity Park, is already underway, and built development already stands within the bounds of the AC15 site allocation. This includes the Nuclear Skills Academy at the iHub, the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre building, and an industrial unit identified as Project Ivory. Some infrastructure needed to support growth at this end of the city has also been delivered already, and this includes flood storage areas and the highway that is Infinity Park Way, identified in past local plans as Road T12. Members will also be aware that planning permission was granted in 2021 for a key section of the infrastructure for the South Derby Growth Zone in the form of a new road junction on the A50 with a link road connecting to this site and Infinity Park Way. And the bounds of the application site include land across which that consented route will extend. The landscape in which the red edge boundary of this application site is therefore already changing. This is in accordance with the Council's aspirations for the delivery of employment and growth at this southern edge of the city. Members will note that this planning application is accompanied by an environmental statement and is supported by an extensive suite of information. As indicated in your report, the red edge boundary of the site does not include all of the land identified for development in the AC15 allocation. However, its submission is a welcome step in allowing a holistic consideration of the impacts associated with the delivery of this employment land allocation and an understanding of the development partners' aspirations for this area of growth. We are satisfied that the information supporting the application is sufficiently robust to enable the likely environmental impacts of the proposal to be fully considered. I have no updates for the report, and the main material considerations for members to consider this evening are outlined in section 7. The main issues relate to the mix of land uses proposed and their accordance with local plan policy requirements, the ability of the illustrative master plan and landscape and ecological plans to demonstrate that the development potential of the site can be maximised, taking on board further local plan policy requirements and impacts on landscape, ecology, amenity, heritage and archaeology and the adjacent green wedges. The suitability of the proposed drainage and flood alleviation measures proposed to address flood risk and accommodate sustainable means to drain the site, and the implications of the proposals for the Derby Highway network and the wider strategic road network. The conclusions drawn in section 7.11 of your report are that the application demonstrates that there is no highway, flood risk, landscape, visual, ecological, amenity, heritage and ground condition impacts arising that cannot be suitably mitigated through the design of the development and secured at the reserve matters stage or through conditions of planning permission. While some adverse highway, landscape and visual effects are unavoidable and the resulting loss of landscape features including hedgerows and trees are negative aspects of the development, suitable green infrastructure will be secured which will provide net gains for biodiversity on the site. While the application is for outline planning permission with all matters reserved, it is considered that the mitigation measures that are fully outlined in the report are suitable to manage the identified environmental effects of the development to an acceptable level, commensurate with an area of the city that is to be subject to a significant level of growth. We are satisfied that those measures can be secured through reserve matters applications, the recommended conditions of planning permission and the Section 106 agreement. The National Planning Policy Framework places considerable weight on the need to support economic growth. I would highlight the socio-economic benefits arising from the development and its potential to accommodate in the region of 2,731 gross full-time equivalent jobs on site once completed. These are significant benefits that weigh heavily in favour of the proposal. And I would highlight the support given to the proposal by our regeneration and major projects colleagues, who amongst other benefits state that the proposals will deliver objectives of the Derby Recovery Plan, improve the resilience of the city's economy and promote the creation of new jobs and have a positive impact on economic activity in the city. The application is recommended for approval subject to the recommended conditions that are presented in an abbreviated format and the completion of the Section 106 agreement. The application did not generate any third-party objections and we have no speakers this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Excellent presentation. I think it's an excellent scheme as well. I really do. I think it's just going to regenerate all that end of the city, and just let's hope we can push on. Let's hope we can push on. Any comments, Councillor Kerr?
Yeah, thank you. This was a marathon to read, Chair. But having read through so many comments and made notes about so many things at the end, I felt that probably as you did, Chair, that the summarising and the conclusions that were drawn to and some of the priorities that were highlighted by our planning officer at the end there were reassuring against the comments that I had pulled on the way. And I think the majority of the things that I just want to mention specifically are things that will either come up at a reserve matter stage or need to be considered as part of the writing of the conditions. So, for example, our rights of way officer highlighted the need to improve and upgrade some of the rights of ways and to make opportunities for that. He suggested that 3 metres would be appropriate. Now, some of the routes here could be comparable to the Riverside route along the edge of Pride Park. It's a similar area of quite industrial use, and there will be some heavy flows, hopefully, of active travel at that time. And I think even if we build it at 3 metres, we need to ensure that if we're widening things and can provide to 4 metres, 4 metres may well be needed in the future. So I'm supporting that aspiration that he had, which isn't specifically mentioned elsewhere, but as I say, may come in later on. The biggest impact that this will have on the city is in its construction and the use in terms of the carbon footprint. And that doesn't seem to have been drawn out on here, and there doesn't seem to be a specific requirement, though it may be there as potentially as a condition, to ensure that we're making best use of those roof spaces. South Derbyshire District commented that this seemed quite intense to them, and they have the luxury of loads of space compared to what we do. And therefore, in terms of our biodiversity net gain, if we've got roofs that aren't having PVs on them, can they be roofs that have that are flat roofs, that are green roofs? And I think we should be maximising all those grey areas that we can see on the plan in front of us at the moment. Would be dead space if we're not putting PVs on them and we're not putting green roofs on them. So is there some way that we can condition that or ensure it's there as part of the further requests that have been coming in? In terms of that as well, there was a comment that this will impact visually, and one of the impacts are going to be these big buildings. We're starting to put green walls on buildings. We've got a green wall on the Aldi on Ricknord Road. Some of these buildings might also be suitable for green walls, and maybe that is something else that can come in and be commented on. I want to be specific now about the changes on Merrill Way, and there's a comment on Merrill Way that we need to, that there's a conflict between needing to move a hedge. I can visualise the area, I can look at it on Google Street View. It's not a route that I've regularly walked along, but could the footway go to the rear of the hedge? Leave the hedge as existing, it's a decent hedge. Can it go to the rear, and that would then maybe save the hedge, still provide the pedestrian facilities? I have a wider principle that I don't think we can change at this point here, but I would really appreciate thinking about in more detail later, which is how we widen a junction to facilitate the additional road traffic, but that widens it also for people who wish to walk across the road or cycle across that junction. And there's a conflict there, and I don't think we've done enough work on ensuring that we're getting the best answers for that. So that's really a message back to designers to maybe discuss in greater detail with applicants and their highway specialists in the future. But in principle, I think this is a good development. I think we've done quite a lot of work, quite a lot of the principles are really good, and it'll be interesting to see how those reserve matters come in and how the detailed applications that will follow from this as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Sarah, did you make a note of all those? I have, just in case.
I did. I will come back on a few items just to say that there is the balance to be achieved here in terms of maximising the development potential across the site. and achieving the amount of employment development that the local plan allocations are trying to secure, but also ensuring that we look at the environmental effects and delivering the green infrastructure in the right places, making sure screening's provided where necessary, considering the green wedges and adjacent developments. But Councillor Kerr is right in terms of a lot of that detailed design will come through as the reserve matters. It is a scheme that's in pure outline with all matters reserved, so we will be looking at detailed designs when those future applications come in. I mean, we can add a note to applicant to stress the need for reserve matters to consider all the green credentials that Councillor Kerr has raised.
Lucy, happy with that?
I'd be interested also for the applicants to consider the opportunity for the whole, looking at the energy requirements of the whole site holistically, and they must already be working with National Grid on their electricity demands, but how we can make them more of a sustainable overall area by maximising the electricity that's generated from PVs and storing that on site for use later on, and for PVs on charging and things like that. I think it could be a really interesting example of sustainable electricity generation and use if we wanted it to make it that. So if they've got the appetite to do something like that, I think that would be good for the city.
I'm assuming that's being noted. Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in general, very supportive of this application. I wonder if the officers could just maybe say a little bit about a couple of issues. One is the low-lying nature of this land. It is quite low. So don't know if we could hear just a little bit more about flood and flood defence and arrangements that are put in place to make sure that that's dealt with. Also traffic access, whether this will be dependent on the A50 junction, or whether we think that the existing roads will be able to support the traffic that's generated from this particular development. And just a comment really in terms of the mix of the uses. Again, I know that will come through as reserve matters, and we'll be considering that a bit later on, but I think it is worth saying at this point that Infinity Park was always intended to be a destination for high-tech jobs and businesses linked in with Rolls-Royce and the Derby's transport engineering heritage. So I think we do need to just keep an eye on that to make sure that the mix between Class B8, the storage and distribution centres, and the other types such as research and development and office use, general and light industrial use, but we get the right mix there and it doesn't become dominated by storage and distribution uses for which there is provision elsewhere in the city. So about keeping that focus on high-tech jobs and engineering for the city. Yes, with those provisos, I support this, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Noted, Sarah.
Firstly, if I can come back on the low-lying nature of the land, it is identified as being in flood zones 2 and 3, but they have already delivered some flood alleviation measures in terms of the eastern flood storage area, which was delivered alongside T12, so that's Infinity Park Way. And there is also a planning permission granted for the western flood storage area, which sits on the western edge of the red edge of the application site. So the ethos here is to raise land levels across the site and take them out of flood risk. And those storage areas provide the floodplain compensation for the land that's then taken out of that flood risk. With the application is a detailed drainage strategy, which also shows where above ground attenuation would be located. And again, it's making sure we're confident that there's a balance between maximising the development across the site, but making sure they still have space to keep that water on site, and then obviously agree with our land drainage team flow rates for that to leave the site. So we have the benefit of modelling that has been considered by the Environment Agency and land drainage colleagues. We have no outstanding objections in that regard. In terms of, if I just touch on the mix of uses, you are quite right insofar as we don't want this to become dominated by the B8 storage and distribution uses. And policy AC15 does outline a requirement for that to be limited to 50%. So we are proposing a condition which the developers are happy with that limits that requirement. And then in terms of traffic and access, I will pass on to Mr. Gibbard, if that's okay.
Wish again, Sarah. Thank you. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, in terms of the question whether the development is dependent on the A50, what I would say is that obviously T12 was part of the mitigation for Chellaston Business Park, and that's had significant benefits on taking traffic away from the A514. But also, I think that this scheme has been tested with and without the A50 junction. The A50 junction obviously has significant benefits across the whole network. In particular, it provides a huge relief to the Bonnie Prince Charlie junction, which isn't necessarily ours. It sits in the county's area and is controlled by National Highways. But obviously for residents, you know, coming down the A514 and from the IPD area, it obviously has huge benefits in terms of getting out. So it has been tested with and without the A50 junction, and the mitigation that's been put forward by the developers has tried to negate those impacts. They are basically in the same area, I'd say, even with the A50 junction, Merrill Way and Sinfin Lane in particular are two access points to this area. So, you know, they've put forward, I mean, the schemes are slightly different, but basically, you know, that's the location and the mitigation. So it's been tested with and without, and it's, you know, we think that it's acceptable. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Is that okay, Martin? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, I think we should all welcome this as forward-looking Derby City Councillors. It's in line with our city growth agenda, and obviously the knock-on effects it has on our economic development and the jobs it will be providing. I was interested on page 90, where it states that there's been no objections at all from our specialist consultees. So I think that goes a long way in saying, you know, everyone's going to be working to get what's best for the site. And then on page 92, 7.6, the ecology and nature conservation. I'm sure the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust will methodically do their work, but I think it is important that we have a construction environmental management plan, and I'm sure we will. I'm sure Sarah will ensure we get that. But I think that's important for the site because of the nature, habitats and fauna that are potentially there. But on the whole, you know, this is a scheme that I think we've waited some time for, and I realise it's outlined with all matters reserved, so I'm sure there'll be further discussions along the way. But generally welcome, Chair.
Lovely. Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely, the officer clearly demonstrated the economic benefits and jobs, even in construction. There's jobs and a huge boost to the local economy as well over the 7-year build period. On page, talking about the 7-year build period, on page 26 it talks about the transport assessment and the recommendation that 10% of the car parking spaces across each unit will be fitted with electric charging points. Now, 7 years, 2030 is when the sale of petrol and diesel cars will cease, and it will be electric or similar. But I would have thought primary electric, given the technology over the next 7 years. Is that enough? And if officers do believe that that is reasonable, is there any consideration about that transition, rapid transition at 2030, to a much higher percentage of electric vehicles being used for people who work on this site many others as well. I just think 7 years is not a long time, and it just aligns with that massive transition. And we're all starting now to think about what the infrastructure is going to be needed for that amount of electric vehicles on the roads, and the rapid transition as well. So it's just a thought to see whether that 10% is a little low.
Thank you. Sarah?
I don't know if Mr Gibbard wants to comment on this.
Thank you, Chair. I think the issue is that, you know, there isn't prescriptive guidance on the level that you should provide. I think partly because that will be driven by the market and the demand for it. You know, I think we've asked for 10% because we think that that's reasonable. I guess moving forward, if they require more, then I guess that's for individual occupiers to decide that. What I will say is that obviously I don't think every single space probably needs one. I don't think that electric vehicles and the way that people charge them necessarily works that way. I think most people probably charge at home if they can. So I think providing, I think this is, the problem is trying to forecast what that percentage should be, and I think that's quite a difficult thing to put forward to developers at the moment. But I think, you know, 10% is probably a good starting point, I'd say. But I do understand the concern, and, you know, particularly with the whole EV, you know, whole of the stop selling wet fuel cars by 2030. You know, the fleet's going to change over the next 15 years after that, so it'll probably all be EV by that point.
Thank you. Could we make a condition, like only a slight amendment, but put in minimum 10%? I know it's that, but it gives you the option then to move it up. Councillor Kerr.
I think this is a really exciting area, because an electric car is not just an item that you may want to connect in to power up, but if you're able to connect in, you can also sell your power back to the grid if you have the right arrangements there. And it may be that people will choose to effectively power their car from home off their own PVs and their own battery packs, and sell it when it's required at peak levels when they get to work. And I think this sort of connection is why it would be really interesting to know how we can actually make this an industrial area that can be an example of how people will need to do it in the future. And that's why I was commenting earlier that the electricity and working with the power companies and the developers for the whole of this site could be really exciting. And this is just part of what it could be doing.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Any more comments? We shall move to the vote. All those in favour? That's a unanimous one, Stephen.
Yep, unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Microphone on. 7.3, the Eagle Market, Morlidge and Castle and Folford Public House. My colleague on the right-hand side, Mr Woodhead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. In the spirit of economic regeneration, we'll move on to this application, and we've only got one housekeeping item, Chair. An email was circulated yesterday which highlights the applicant's commitment to exploring and accommodating renewable energy to power this proposal and the wider Derby Centre. On to the main report, Chair. Your report does deal with all the relevant material considerations, and overall, the positive public benefits of the proposal decisively outweigh any negative elements, in my opinion. In essence, the scheme comprises demolition of the Castle and Falcon Public House and the access ramps and steps that sit between it and 9 East Street. The demolition works also include the 2-storey Eagle Market entrance, which provides access into the building from East Street. I'm sure you know, Chair, but these components are very recognisable components of the cityscape, but in my view, not of great architectural quality, and in my view, contribute little to the existing street scene. In terms of the proposed replacement scheme, would seek to combine a landscaped urban garden component at the front of the site with a distinctive remodelled building facade. As your report states, Chair, the updated scheme will create a split-level area of landscaping extending from the eastern side of East Street to the new facade. A series of garden terraces with opportunities for seating at different levels overlooking the street will create an attractive, inviting edge to the street. Water is to be explored as an option for inclusion, with the terracing and lower level helping to attract families and children. Step routes will provide access from the street to the upper level and into the building. Wheelchair pram access will be via a lift from Morlidge. High quality landscaping materials that complement the existing townscape setting will be used. New tree and shrub planting will be incorporated in order to soften the urban setting, provide shade, improve biodiversity and create additional visual interest. Colourful, tactile and durable play zones are proposed to offer a family-friendly element to the scheme, with curated food and beverage outlets and associated seating bringing further vitality to the site. The landscaping visualisations provide an indication of the proposal for the landscaped area. It is proposed a requirement to submit full details of the landscaping scheme is secured by condition, and that's what we would cover off, Chair. The updated scheme proposes a new mall facade fronting Derby Square. This uses illuminated opal polycarbonate cladding, which is both lightweight and durable, whilst providing a striking visual effect. And this is something we think, Chair, at this Eastern Gateway location is needed to really lift that part of the city. The facade will be backlit with a pattern of LED lights that can be programmed to change colour and pattern timing, creating a dynamic and engaging display. The Morlidge elevation will use white metal cladding, a metal pattern fret wraps around the entire structure to ensure it reads as one singular object. The proposal attracts strong support from the Council's Regeneration and Economic Growth team as a result of the collaborative work to improve key components of the city centre to respond to the challenges of the evolving economy. Members will be aware that this sits happily with the development plan and also the ambition document that was drawn up recently that looks at the changing nature of the city centre and how we need to improve the overall offer with leisure as an important component of it, Chair. As your report states, the family entertainment concept would bring a welcome leisure dimension to Derby and the overall city centre offer. And these uses align with adopted policy and the thrust of the ambition document, Chair, that I've just mentioned. The following details have also been supplied by the applicant. Two of the units within the building are currently under offer, amounted to some 50,000 square foot, which is 4,645 square metres of the overall lettable floor area, to two leading brands within the family entertainment centre sector. Of course, Derby aren't able to release the names at this stage, but that's obviously a positive indication, Chair. The leasing strategy is to secure these two key anchor operators ahead of pushing the marketing of the remaining units, again to prominent and leading operators within this sector. Derby consider that these uses to be extremely complementary to the existing retail and leisure offer within Derby and likely to draw significant footfall to the centre. Chair, we've looked at this application carefully since it was amended. You'll appreciate previously included a retail food store. That's gone away. This is the current offer, and we think it's a really interesting and exciting component in the city centre. And I just promote the recommendations printed, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, well, this is totally different to a Lidl. No disrespect to Lidl, they're a very good company, but I think this would drag a lot of people into the city. The Eastern Gateway needs refurbishing. It needs making it inviting to visitors, especially you get off the bus and you walk into that was on there. I know it's an artist's impression, but if we can get something like that, that will get some people in there. Got a few hands up at the moment. Councillor Hassel was first one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very much welcome this application. Yes, it has changed from the previous iteration of it, but it's nice that we're looking at bringing some green into the city centre and opening up, which is really what a significant gateway from a large transport hub, which is the bus station. I think people will be drawn to this space rather than avoiding it like perhaps they might do now. It's not a welcoming space as it currently sits. The pub really doesn't offer much in the way of architectural value, as already been mentioned, nor does it attract any significant footfall, I wouldn't imagine either. It's about time we move towards being a city, as we discussed at our last planning committee, this helps us move a step closer towards being a city in name as well as in place. So, yeah, very much welcome this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Noel.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really, I would like to lend my voice supporting this. But, you know, what I'll just stress, I know it might not need stressing, but it's when you look at the geo-environmental risk assessment and the need to, one, keep, just manage the noise on you know, whilst this is going on, and also the air pollution, because the city centre, unlike maybe a year or two ago, has become quite a hub for families who also live there now. So now you have more residents in and around there. It would be very welcome development if we were to take into consideration the fact that you have not just these families, but young children at any given time running around here. So please, I would like to see how we take that into consideration, especially, you know, the risk of, you know, some level of air pollution, you know, but, you know, with those, if we can get those assurances in place, I would like us to, you know, but I would like to support this. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've covered off the issue of noise. We'll be looking at a condition to really address that once we know what we're dealing with in the building, and also in terms of the initial stage of demolition and rebuild. We'll be looking at construction environmental management plan to ensure that everything that goes off there does deal, you know, and sits happily within whilst it's within the middle of the city centre. I fully take on board issues about residential amenities, so we'll look at that. And my colleague Carl is here tonight, who's looked at this application, and so we'll be working with our colleagues in his team to ensure that all the noise mitigation is properly dealt with.
thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. 3 points, I think it's 3. First of all, I absolutely agree with you. This is a far better prospect than what it could have been. With all due respect, I didn't want a food store being the anchor for this. So I'm far happier now seeing this. I think actually this could help the council really push forward with the use of river lights and the river gardens as well. It's always been difficult to get people to actually go to that regenerated area. It's a great space, a really huge asset for the city, and I think this, with its design and actually probably some supplemental work that the council could probably look at and the regen team could look at to actually have traffic footfall, not just go here, but obviously through to one of our huge assets that we have, which is the river gardens. But on that, the third point is, and I mentioned this in a previous application at the other end of Derby, and I'd still have concerns that we, whilst absolutely support Derby as in our city, they are very, very important. We've just got to be careful not to see them suck all of the footfall into that within it, because it'd be interesting to know, but I would probably say at the moment that quite a lot of people who visit Derby potentially go to Derby on, into Derby on, park in Derby on, shop, leisure, go home. They didn't go to the other shops. They didn't have a walk around some of our fantastic attractions and historic areas potentially. And that's a worry for me, is that, yes, absolutely needed. We need this gateway and it's fantastic. We just have to balance that to make sure that we are thinking of the whole city centre holistically. And that's just something which I always have a worry over. But yeah, overall, absolutely fantastic. Delighted with this moving forward, and I'm certainly supporting it, Chair.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with everything that's already been said. It's a very positive step forward for the city centre. Just perhaps a comment on the use and thinking about the city centre going forward, it does very much fit in with the plans that we have. There'll be less demand for retail in the future, and there's more demand for leisure type activities. So I do welcome the proposed use as leisure. It will bring more people into the city centre, no doubt. The public realm looks to be really good quality, high quality. I guess we'll be conditioning the materials that are used for that. The visuals for that do look very good, and it's, as has already been said, it's nice to see that sort of greenery coming into the city centre, give people an attractive place to meet. So overall, yes, very positive, Chair, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bolton and Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we're doing well tonight, aren't we? The city would look splendid soon. I don't know how long this is going to take, but let's bring it on. My only concern, and not to repeat what's already been said about economic growth and obviously making our city centre more attractive, it's the closeness of the bus station. And with the terracing and the outdoor space, what's the air quality in that location? And particularly bearing in mind it's quite near the bus station.
Do you want to come in on that one, Ian?
I couldn't give you a proper update on that. I mean, my friend Carl over there could possibly interject at this point, but in terms of we are looking at, you know, a city centre location, so it's not going to be the best air quality, and this, you know, this has been obviously considered as part of this proposal, but Carl can hopefully help out here.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chair. I'll do my best. We do undertake monitoring within the city centre. We've got currently a monitoring location quite close to this location on the Moorledge, on a lamppost just outside the camping shop on the corner, Millets as it was, forget what it's called these days. We are within the nitrogen dioxide targets around this area, I think largely to do with reductions on the Moorledge and on Corporation Street. There's been some extra traffic restrictions. I think we're well within the targets at the moment. In terms of the relationship with the bus station, I think the open space being proposed here is a sufficient distance away from that turning point where the buses enter into the bus station, which would be where probably the highest levels are associated with the buses. But I still think, you know, the volumes of traffic that we get on the Moorledge these days are sufficiently low that we're not really more concerned than certainly any other city centre locations, and sort of, like I say, well within the national targets that would fall within planning policy.
Thanks, Carl. Councillor Kerr.
I also welcome this. It sounds a bit monotonous, doesn't it? And I also welcome the comments that they come back to look at renewable energy within the scheme. So I think that's a really positive sign. I was wondering whether in the landscaping condition there was going to be any comment about the species that are being used within the landscaping, and whether they can be ones that will actually be beneficial to wildlife, UK wildlife, because there is a tendency to look at planting schemes that are predominantly for visual amenity and not biodiversity, and I wondered how that was going to be balanced. We had already this evening comments about bricks for swifts. There's obviously a comment here about whether or not there were bats in the existing building, but wouldn't it be nice if there were bats in the new building? And we were providing opportunities for our wildlife in other ways. And I wonder if that is going to be conditioned as commented on as part of the landscaping condition, or whether we should be having an additional condition for that.
I'll flesh out the landscaping condition, Chair. I think that's reasonable. In terms of the species mix, Councillor Kerr, and then look at opportunities if there's anything on the building, within the building, that we can look at for species habitat. So we'll do that, Chair.
Lovely. Thanks, Ian. Any other questions? Move to the vote, shall we? All those in favour? Oh, another full house, Stephen. Another full house. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And we're on to 7.4, another one in the city centre, another one that we can hopefully get sorted out tonight. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Assembly Rooms. It was April 2021 this came to committee, and this is only, as your report states, it's essentially a housekeeping report because, as the barrister would tell us, the application is still within the building, and since the last meeting, other things have been, other things have occurred. We've had a petition in objection. We've dealt with protected species, and certificate of immunity has been issued as well, and we're just reporting it back for your information, Chair. We're not reopening the debate about the merits of the scheme, of the demolition issue. It's just to tell you about those bits of information that are covered off in your rather short report, just for noting, and the conditions remain as per the April 2021 version. So I don't have anything else to drone on about, Chair. Thank you.
You never drone, Ian. You never drone. Councillor Holmes.
At risk of reopening the debate, which I won't. Look, I've got a lot of skin in the game on this one, so I'm keeping an open mind. But I would like to make this point, Chair. You know, I think the principle of demolition obviously has been agreed, and I think we can all agree that is going to happen at some point. But that's the point I'm trying to make here, is that it's not appropriate for me to propose the conditions to be altered or removed. I think that's for the applicant, which is the local authority, the council, to do. And I would certainly encourage them to consider that, because for me, whilst we are noting this, the site still is there, and it is a burden on the city in terms of ongoing costs. Demolition costs are going to be increasing massively every month that it is left there. For me, I would hope that the new administration would maybe take another look at meanwhile use. I think that there is a discussion there that officers may be able to compromise whilst Project Assemble is brought forward, which is going to be something circa 100 million investment. And in these times, that is a big challenge. I just think it's time, Chair, for us to potentially look again at the conditions, maybe clear the site, look at something in the interim so that a larger regeneration of the site can be brought forward in due course. That's all I'll say at the moment. I feel very strongly about it, whilst keeping an open mind about the pros, the cons, and the whys, the wherefores. But whilst we're noting it, I think it needed to be said. And I would hope that somebody within the council is considering maybe talking to officers about potentially discussions on the conditions that were placed on the application by the committee at the time. Thank you.
On that one?
No, that's all duly noted, Chair. Thank you, yeah.
Duly noted. Thank you, Matt. Councillor Kerr.
I'm wanting some clarification, Chair, on what we're actually being asked here, because it says recommendation to note this report. No problem with noting the report. I welcome having an update on what the current situation is and for that to be public. But it also says to grant planning permission with conditions as included in the previous report. Now, we haven't got the whole of the previous report repeated here to remind people as to what they were. And I don't know whether, if we are effectively to re-grant planning permission as before without having a significant debate, that is meaningful. And I would prefer that those words weren't there, because I don't think we should be doing that, and we shouldn't be extending whatever timeframes were included in the previous without that debate, for which we haven't been given the full information. So I would like us just to be noting this report, full stop, and not considering the rest of that statement.
I'll defer to Stephen on that, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I mean, I have no issue in terms of what you suggest. I mean, the permission hasn't actually been issued, has it? No. Ian. So the report is there just as an update to the position before the permission is actually issued, which effectively we're now in a position to do. So there's no particular material change to the original matters that were considered by committee, so there's no reason to change that decision earlier on. So So it's effectively, I think the wording was designed basically just to say, to note the report, and that we're going to be basically endorsing the original decision to grant, because there's not been any change. So I think that's what the wording is intended to do. So whether you want to remove that or not, if you just want to sort of say, to note the report and confirm the issue of the planning permission as previously authorised, if you're happy with wording to that effect.
I don't think, Chair, we need to say anything more than to note the report, and the other things will go on as they would do anyway, as approved by previous committee, rather than the committee that has quite a lot of new members on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. I mean, that's no problem with that.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wasn't part of the debate in April 21, but I agree that the site should be demolished. It's an eyesore. It's standing idle. It's got to go. My concern is my recollections when I was on the council previously, and we demolished the opposite corner, the marketplace, and it was an empty hole for years and years and years. What I don't want to happen here is that we demolish it all and then it's standing idle until we have a project we want to sit on it. And then it will just become an eyesore in our marketplace and spoil the ambience in our city centre. When so much work's going on, and we've heard this evening how much positive applications we're having for the city. Clearly something needs to be done to the site, but as I say, I don't want it to stand there or be idle while we have got projects that, you know, are not definite for the site, and it's just be an eyesore, and the residents of Derby, I'm sure, don't want that.
Yeah, condition 1, Councillor Bolton, covers that off. It's policy compliant and it deals with making sure that there's a redevelopment scheme in place before we demolish. So it's a conservation area location, and we want to ensure that we've got something in place. We all know what it's about, what it's going to be, what's going to be delivered, and it's there before anybody demolishes it. So we're not left in that scenario, Councillor Bolton.
Thanks, Ian. Anybody else want to come in on this? I agree with Councillor Bolton. Yes, we want it knocked down. I agree with Councillor Holmes. Yes, we want it demolished. And I would tend to agree. And if there is another plan in place that we could put at a lesser cost that would generate some footfall into that area when that building is knocked down, which I think I would say that the vast majority of Derby residents want it knocking down. And they're just getting fed up of seeing it, and that's why there's no movement. We're getting Quad coming in saying they want a 150 grand loan because there's no footfall in that area. It's my personal view, and yes, I am chair, and I'm sitting up here, and I would love to see it knocked down, something there while we're discussing Project Assemble. Let's have some nice, everyone's been saying how the Derby would look with green and blue from the Guildhall down to the Museum of Making with bits and bobs. I'm not a planner, I'm not suggesting anything, but something like that would encourage people to come into the city. I really would. So if that's a consideration, that is my final word on that, and I do apologise for taking that up. So yeah, but other than that, shall we move to the vote? All those in favour of the noted? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Seven in favour.
Anybody against? No. One against.
One against.
Chair. Thank you very much. We move on now to potential site visits. Sarah, is that you? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. There's quite a number of major site visits which you may or may not wish to visit. First one is St Modwyn Park, which is the old Wyvern site. It's for another very large industrial business unit on the site. Shout up if anybody wants to visit. If not, I'll carry on. Next one is the site, which is the former Knoll on Village Street. Members may be familiar with it. It's owned by Derby Homes. It's another housing scheme for Derby Homes, 18 houses. It's got a TPO trees on the site. Well, that's a consideration that obviously we'll be making. The application's quite new, but okay, moving on. This is an outline application with access for land which is currently part of Leesbrook Community School for up to 18 dwellings, access off Morley Road. Okay, moving on. This is change of use, Queen's Hall, London Road. Members may be familiar with it, locally listed building. No extensions, just this conversion to 21 apartments. Yeah, it from the street. Part of it is locally listed, yeah. Not listed, but locally listed. Next one, yeah, Rolls-Royce Wainsway, pure outline for major redevelopment, multi-storey car park, B2, B8, infrastructure, vehicles, cycle parking, etc. This is another Derby Homes application, redevelopment of Britannia Court. It's obviously been demolished for a while now, for 12 dwelling houses for the affordable scheme. Next one is change of use of an existing waste transfer station on Downing Road off Ascot Drive to metal recycling site. Next one is a variation of condition to a scheme at Derby High School, which was approved last year for some changes. St Benedict's Catholic Voluntary Academy, new two-storey science block for the front of the site and outdoor PE courts to the rear. The science building is going towards the front, facing towards Duffield Road, and the playing courts are at the rear. So there's two sites at the back. The final one is extensions to Stevenson Building on the Roundhouse application, Roundhouse site application for a three-storey extension at the rear of the building. And that's it. Yeah, it's for engineering and IT courses. And that's all for this month.
Thanks, Sarah, for those. And that's your lot, everybody. Thanks for attending. Thank you very much, and let's hope all this regeneration that we're looking at takes place and all these artists' impressions come to fruition. So thank you very much, and we'll see everybody in September, I believe. So we've got August off, so yes. So thanks very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.